So why tier 2 and tier 3 cities are best for starting your contract drafting practice? So one of the four most important thing is, especially if you're somebody who is from a tier 2 and tier 3 city, who has gone to study in another city and who does not come from a litigation background or legacy. So what happens is when you move out, you have a lot of associated costs. So these costs, when you're staying at your hometown, all of these costs are minimized. So that is one of the foremost benefit that is there if you're starting your contract drafting practice in your hometown. Other than that, I'll be discussing what are the specific benefits that you get. So first, there's very less competition. So Indore is a commercial hub in Madhya Pradesh, but I can still vouch that the number of lawyers who are actively involved in drafting contracts, who are active on social media, who do exclusively this kind of work, you can count on fingers. So unlike metro cities where you have law firms or startup law firms or other legal startups which do contract drafting for very less money, or which have a big setup, such setups are absolutely absent in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. So that becomes one of the best part, that you will have the first mover advantage because nobody has came into that space right now. Second, less knowledge of contemporary developments. So most people don't understand that they take contract drafting as a very technical or a very mindless application task, that you have a draft and you just edit the details of your client and give it to them. But no, a lot of contract drafting when you're doing, you have to understand contemporary legal scenario and what are the fallouts of that. For instance, the pandemic, how you would have drafted your dispute resolution clause, your indemnity clause would have been very different before pandemic, but now these things come into play. So when you know about contemporary developments, when you know that what are the changes that are happening, what are the judgments that have come, you have an advantage over other lawyers. I don't mean, so this is something you will notice that in lot of tier 2 and tier 3 cities, there will be very few lawyers who keep abreast of contemporary developments. So again, if you follow news, if you follow what is happening, how courts are dealing, how various courts are dealing with these clauses, you will obviously gain an advantage and offer a service that will stand out in comparison to your peers. Third, absence of law firms. So this I have already discussed previously. If there is no proper setup, and I don't mean just law firms, there are legal startups if you will see now, which have very good setup, which offer contract drafting service for very less money. But in tier 2 and tier 3 cities, such setups are absolutely absent. Generally, most of the contract drafting work is done by legacy lawyers who will have one or two templates which they keep recycling for a period of time. Guys, just give me a minute. Yeah. So I was discussing that how, because of absence of a proper setup in these cities, you get get an obvious advantage over your peers, or you don't face the stiff competition that is there in other places. Plus, one thing you'll notice with most of the lawyers who do contract drafting work, legacy lawyers, they will be having same drafts over last 10 years, 5 years, the same employment agreement, without ever seeing that how new laws have come, how changes have come. Those are not incorporated. So yeah, next point is increasing focus of government on startups and enterprises in tier 2 cities. So as you would have seen that if you will see the Startup India scheme and other scheme, they specifically give incentives to those enterprises in MSME sectors and those companies that have their base in tier 2, tier 3 cities. This is obviously for employment generation, but this also comes with an added advantage to you, that they are trying to create an ecosystem where there are more commercial matters, more companies in these cities. Fifth, COVID-19 pandemic. So this is the most recent thing that has happened. Because of this, most of the offices, if you'll see, they have shifted their base from high rent paying cities to smaller cities. Now, what happens with this is, because of you being in proximity with with these companies, new startups, you obviously get an advantage over other places. And also, the number of startups or companies that you would have seen who have shifted their base to smaller cities have been rising since past few months. So yeah, these because of this, I always think that there is an inherent advantage if you're doing some niche work like contract drafting, and if you can offer service which is better than lawyers and other